Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. You're very, very welcome. If you've just discovered this channel, if you like the video and you watch the video and you think this stuff's quite interesting, want to press that subscribe button, that would be lovely. You can also press like, you can leave a comment as well, and also check out the new Facebook page, which I set up last couple of days to try and get a bit of a community going. Come along and join up, leave a comment. I've been posting a couple of comments about things that are coming up in the channel soon, so come on, join in. In this video, I'm looking at a new series which debuted on Amazon Prime. I think it arrived on January the 6th. A 6-episode supernatural science fiction thriller called The Rig, which was created by one David McPherson. I think it was a BBC sort of, well, not BBC Scotland, but it was made in Scotland for Amazon Prime. And as it's a British series, I was particularly interested in it because I'm a bit of a fan of British genre shows. We don't do that many. Doctor Who keeps flying the flag, but we do occasionally dip our toes in the water. Last year we had what I thought was the excellent adaptation of John Wyndham's Midwich Cuckoos and the weird, wacky time travel series, The Lazarus Project, which I really enjoyed, which is coming back for a second series fairly soon, I think. So we do make efforts now and again, but I think British television, certainly in the last 20 odd years, has felt a bit self-conscious about doing anything imaginative because I think they're a bit worried about the sniffy critics calling it hokum and the public saying it's too far-fetched. And those are two descriptions of things that really wind me up. When I read in the newspaper somebody saying this is enjoyable hokum, or somebody says, oh, it's a bit far-fetched, I think, well, how limited are your imaginations if you can't stretch them beyond detective dramas and procedural dramas and soap operas, which are the bane of British television and remain the bane of British television, which is why I like to champion something new, which doesn't go down those familiar roads. And that's what The Rig does, or at least attempts to do. I watched all 6 episodes over 2 days. I found it very engrossing, very compelling, very watchable, but I am conscious that there were some significant faults in its creative DNA, if you like. I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say it's a classic piece of television or a classic piece of genre television, but it's an interesting experiment. I think what let it down was some of the production techniques, but we'll go into that shortly. Basically, the story is set on an oil rig, which is 150 miles out off the coast of Scotland in the North Sea. A cold, bitter, hostile environment. You would think the riggers are looking forward to some downtime. A lot of them are going home. Suddenly a strange mist rolls in across the sea. It cuts off communication. They can't make contact with the land or the beach, as they keep calling it. Suddenly a strange ash, almost like a volcanic ash, starts to fall. And strange things start happening to some of the riggers and the rig itself. It quickly becomes apparent that there's some strange force or intelligence at work which is doing its best to isolate the rig for its own mysterious purposes. It's a good cast. We have a good cast here. We have Emily Hampshire, who is well known from things like Schitt's Creek, apparently, playing Rose Mason. She's an oil rig company representative, and luckily she's a scientist, so she becomes the hero figure of this all-male environment, oddly enough. She's supported by Ian Glenn as Magnus Macmillan. He's the manager of the rig, ostensibly. Martin Compston is one of the riggers, Fulmer Hamilton, and you've got familiar TV names like Mark Bonner, Owen Teale and Rochella Sandel playing supporting characters on the rig. And Mark Addy, the likeable and reliable Mark Addy, turns up at the end of episode 4 to add a twist of villainy to the proceedings. And that's not necessarily a spoiler, because that becomes apparent fairly early on. I generally enjoyed this. I mean, I went into it thinking, oh, well, at least here we've got a series which is just going to have a sort of a core masculine cast of characters. You know, it's a man's environment. Now, I don't know anything about oil rigging. I don't know if they do have mixed sex crews these days. I have no idea. But there was certainly a preponderance, as is inevitable these days, of strong, powerful female characters and some rather weak male characters. That Magnus himself, the manager of the rig, is a little bit weak. I mean, he's got his own traumas to deal with. His 8-year-old son was killed in a motor accident years ago, and he holds the responsibility for that, even though it wasn't his fault, but that sort of weakens him a little bit. And you've got some other male characters who are sort of conflicted and and have their own issues to deal with. But as tends to be the way these days, the female characters are the ones that are strong and keep everybody on the straight and narrow. And you do think that in this environment, perhaps we could have set that aside for a little while and told a story about men in a workplace dealing with something without having to deal with the issue of these powerful female characters. That's just a personal thing. It made the reality of the thing slightly off kilter for me a little bit. Beyond that, in terms of the story itself, it was an intriguing story. At its heart, there's quite a strong science fiction concept. I won't reveal what that is here, but there is an intelligence that isn't human involved. Not necessarily, in fact, not at all something alien, but something natural, if you like. And the series has an ecological sort of theme to it in a way, of Earth sort of defending itself from its misuse by humanity is a sort of a thread throughout the story. And generally it's very good. I mean, I felt compelled to watch the whole thing. At the end of episode 4, something happens and made me think, I've got to watch episode 5 now. And I started watching episode 5 before I went to bed and finished it off the next day. So I think I watched 4 in the first day and 2 in the second. It's very compelling. Every episode makes you want to watch the next episode. But there are flaws. I mean, there are certain flaws in that I think it's a 6-part story with a 4-part a 6-part serial with a 4-part story. It's not really quite enough to keep the pace and momentum of the story going across 6 episodes. So there are places where it feels a bit padded. There are certain characteristics and character traits that make you go, oh, that's just there to pad things up or to create a couple of extra scenes. It doesn't have a particularly organic flow to it because certain things suddenly appear, certain storylines and story beats appear, which are just there to fill up the running time, I sort of feel, although it's not necessarily the case, but that's certainly the way it comes across. The biggest problem for me with the series, I never felt I was outdoors. I never felt I was out in the North Sea. I never felt I was out on a rig, on an exposed rig, suffering privations and suffering at the hands of wild weather. And that's because it was all filmed indoors. Now, the sets are great. The sets of the rig, whether they're model sets or the actual indoor sets. And I know they built a helipad for a couple of scenes. The sets are fantastic. What lets it down, and it's a shame what lets it down, are the show's attempts to convince us that it's outdoors. It's obviously, and it's all filmed in a huge warehouse up in Scotland. And they've obviously used green screen around the set. And then green screened the sea and the sky into it, but it doesn't convince me it's real. I never felt that was a real environment. It looked artificial. It didn't look, the roiling waves looked artificial. The sky, the darkening, lowering sky, it just looked like it was something being projected onto a green screen behind the acting. It never felt real. You also had lots of scenes of people outside on the rig, out and about. Bearing in mind we're in the North Sea, no cold air coming out of their mouths, cold breath. They're never particularly sprayed by water. It looks slightly windy occasionally. It doesn't look like a howling nightmare landscape, which it probably would be to a lot of people, and even riggers would be struggling to stay upright and to be heard. But everybody's just wandering around. They've got the coats on, but nobody looks cold, nobody looks uncomfortable, nobody looks as if they're suffering in this environment. So I didn't believe the environment. I didn't believe I was where I was supposed to be. And that was every scene that was set outside, if you like. I was thinking, no, that's in a studio set. It's a studio set. And even if I hadn't known it was a studio set, you would watch it and think, that's a studio set. Which is a shame, because I think if you don't believe in the environment of the story, it does undermine the story a little bit. And I think that was just so obvious to me that it just pulled me out of the story a little bit. I was trying to think, oh, this must be a terrible situation. But no, it's not, because that's not real. Which is a shame, because I think there's a lot of potential in this. It certainly, in the last couple of episodes, it ventures into sort of proper apocalyptic science fiction territory. I think it abandons any pretense of being a thriller or a mystery when it goes full sci-fi, if you like. And it does set up a second series. I hear there is going to be a second series. That intrigues me, because it ain't going to be called The Rig, because of what happens in the last episode. And there is a sort of cliffhanger at the end, what's happening beyond the world of The Rig. And all in all, I did enjoy it. Obviously, I watched it over 2 days, so it wasn't a chore to watch. I flew through it. But I was conscious of certain faults in the scripting. Some of the acting isn't as good as it should be. Certainly some of the supporting characters. There's one particular character who is the first character who is affected by what's happening, and his acting is not great. But, you know, the core cast are very good because they're very experienced, they're very good, and they work their way through any difficulties with the plot, and they carry it. But it's worth a look. I wouldn't write it off. If you're interested in it and you thought, I wonder what that's like, it's not bad. It's very watchable. As I say, it's just 6 episodes. If it had been a Netflix 8 or 10, it might have been a struggle. But as I said, I think you'll get through it fairly easily, and I think you'll find it fairly enjoyable. And on that basis, I'm going to give The Rig a decent 7 out of 10, because overall I enjoyed it, and I would watch a second series. And I think that's the test, really. If you watch a show and think, yeah, I'd watch more of this. That's The Rig, which is on Amazon Prime or Prime Video. Now, 6 episodes all there. Have a look. If you've watched it, why don't let me know by leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought of The Rig. As my review influenced your decision on whether to watch it or not. Then let me know. Join in, leave a comment, and don't forget to press that like button and subscribe to the channel. It'd be nice to get those subscriber numbers up a little bit. Right, thank you very much for watching. I will see you soon. Until I do, hey, you've got to keep taking this stuff. Blah.